Hello, good morning, and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily, coming to you live from our Lagos studio. I'm Ayo Makinde. Well, the first thing that I would like for us all to think about as a nation today has to do with the populations. We have heard so many people talk about this aspect of our national lives, and one thing that it straight away points to is exactly where it starts from or how it begins. We've heard former President Olusegun Obasanjo talk over and over again about the need for us to monitor our population and do whatever it is that we need to do about it. I would want to take the monitoring part first, but before that, we've also listened to so many people, actually, including the NPC, even the president of the AFDB, who happens to be a Nigerian, also talk about the fact that our population is not a liability, especially young people. They are assets. But then, how many are we? It's a question so many people are asking, because if you don't know what you have, you don't know how many people you need to care for, how do you plan for them? And that's one of the reasons that the NPC, National Population Commission, has been talking about, perhaps, embarking on another headcount altogether. But that's for those of us that we know, who live in homes and all of that. But there's a little more troubling one, and that's the case of birth registration. This report that you're about to see tells you a little more about that.
This internally displaced persons camp located in Durumi Area 1 is one of the 18 IDP camps in the Federal Capital Territory, and it provides accommodation for over 2,700 people, most of whom are victims of conflict in northeast Nigeria. Majority of the children and adults here were not registered at birth, a situation which has prompted the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in collaboration with the National Population Commission, to organize an accelerated birth registration exercise in the camp.
Last year, we set up an action plan with the government to end statelessness, the National Action Plan. That was after a 2019 high-level meeting where this was agreed on. So we're taking it step by step.
According to the United Nations International Children Emergency Fund, UNICEF, more than 50% of the births of children under 5 in Nigeria remain unregistered, accounting for 11% of unregistered children in West Africa.
In most part of Nigeria, a child do not have name at birth. We actually supposed to capture that child as that child is being born, but they will have to go in some part of Nigeria. It's 8 days, some is 40 days, and you find out most of these parents, they don't come back.
The government has, however, scaled up measures to register at least 80% of unregistered children by 2025, in line with the UNHCR target to end statelessness by 2024.
By year 2025, we are going to get 25 million children registered, and that will be just 80% of the unregistered children.
The beneficiaries of the free birth registration exercise are happy about their new status as registered citizens with birth certificates. According to data obtained through Rapid SMS, a web-based platform used by the National Population Commission in tracking birth registration in Nigeria, 6.5 million and 6.2 million under 5 births were registered in 2019 and 2020. This leaves more than 1 million new births unregistered and at the risk of being stateless if no action is taken. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
The first question that came to mind when I saw that, line is the birth registration is, just how does this happen? And of course, the natural thought that will come to my mind is our practices. And as you have also found out, National Population Commission says traditional beliefs and religious, practices are reasons why 50% of the children in IDP camps, in those camps that you saw there, were not registered at birth. Of course, it's a practice, common practice, around us that it's only on the 8th day that we get names that are supposed to be captured at birth. And of course, you know that, in other climes, the name is ready even before the child is born, and the child is named right there at birth. In our culture, in our practices, it is not so for now. But as you also heard in that report, many of the parents don't come back for the registration. And consequently, infrastructures may not be provided for them simply because we don't even know they're there, at least by data. And that's, we may say, it's maybe just for the climes that are not, that they don't have enough education, illiteracy, poverty, and all of that. Even in major cities, you'll find out that it's so easy to get just about anything. I mean, you want to get the birth registration, a birth certificate, a new birth certificate, you will get it willy-nilly. So perhaps that also speaks to the need for us to tighten our noose in that regard. The National Population Commission is already talking about digitizing the process. How will that run? And of course, the thinking is that it's going to be in all 774 local government areas. And of course, you know that in a good number of states in Nigeria, we have local council development areas that are not captured in the Constitution. So, question then is, while that is of course a good thing and should be commended, getting that communication across to the people, now that's another thing altogether. Are we going to ask for tentative names before the day that people are supposed to come and register their children? Are they going to get names at birth and then we'll register accordingly? Exactly how is that going to be? I guess we'll have to allow the authorities to do the needful in order to ensure that we can plan for our people. We still estimate our population and 50% of children, making up about 11% of unregistered children in Africa. Not registered, I don't think that's a good thing for a giant of Africa to do. And that definitely isn't a way to position ourselves as a nation. Let's switch to the papers today and see how far we can go. Let's begin with Daily Trust newspaper this morning, and it begins with this one. Doubts trail surrender of Boko Haram members. That's what you have as lead story of the paper this morning. Certainly troubling, and of course you would know that the governor of Borno State has been expressing deep concerns about that, and so many people, who surrender, and really, is it something for me to cheer? That's what the governor is asking, or is it just something that should continue to give me trepidation? You find the details on pages 4 and 5 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Repentant fighters could be deceptive, says traditional ruler. We're sure they're insurgents. Defense headquarters say will not forgive them. IDPs and residents. Experts call for cautious optimism. That's all of that you find on the front page of the paper, and you have repentant Boko Haram members surrender with their families in those pictures that you see right there. Surrendering to who, and what's the process? Do we have a template for this? Because the idea usually is after some time they are, as we say, reintegrated into community. I guess that's what you will have to find out later. And right under those pictures, despite drop in inflation rate, prices of goods, foodstuff on the rise. So many people would wonder, okay, if inflation figures are dropping, how come food prices are not? Stick with us on the program this morning. We'll take you through all of that and more. Under the major, right above the major headline, bandits kill 7 Nigerian soldiers, 3 villagers, abduct 17 others in Katsina. Seems unending, but that's what you have there. NNPC partners sign 50 megawatt Maiduguri power project pact. And fear grips Zamfara communities as new armed group emerges. I'm pretty sure that we saw all of this coming, but then that's what you have right there on the front page. And as by way of keeping an eye on the issues, school children in captivity, right under the nameplate, Salihu Tanko Islamic School, Tigina, 81 days after. Federal Government College burning Yori, 64 days after. And Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 46 days after. Children are still in captivity. Definitely a job of work for the government to take on. Nigerian News Direct is next, and it leads with PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act, FG to unveil roadmap for subsidy removal. The story is on page 2. Says no sack of oil workers to finalize implementation in 12 months. Of course, that question is still there. When will subsidy be removed? Everybody is interested in that information, and we will definitely get to it. I hope, at least that's what this story, the lead story of the paper this morning, is indicating. And right under that picture, Nigeria needs $400 billion in 29 years to power over 25 million homes, says Jedi Agba. Find out the details on page 16 of the paper. Audit report uncovers 4.97 trillion naira leakages in FG finances. Question is, I say this often on this program, we have been having the Auditor General's report since 2014, and these leakages have been there since the time. What are we doing? What have we done to recoup everything that's locked or leaked? And what are we doing to lock up the leakages or close up the gaps? That's it right there. 4.97 trillion naira leakages in FG finances. The story is on page 13. Is it just for 1 year? Is it since 2014? How many years does that cover? The details on the inside pages. What the 9th National Assembly did to get PIB passed. Find out if you're interested. You should be interested, actually. On page 3 of the Nigerian News Direct this morning is ascribed to the President of the Senate. Blueprint newspaper has this one as the lead story of the paper today. Nigeria lost $50 billion investments to delayed PIB passage. That's what you have right there on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper today. Says Act will end gas flaring, revive host communities. The story is on page 6. And we also have this one, set up steering committee, orders MDAs to comply in 12 months. And 3% of host communities recipe for crisis, says Wike. It has broken NNPC monopoly, says the APC governors. Sorry, that one particularly is on page 16. The details you'll find on the inside pages this morning. And no matter what the controversies are, that bill is now a law and it must be implemented. So I guess we have to wait. And right under the nameplate, 4.973 trillion naira balances in 2019 audit report unsubstantiated. That's according to the Auditor General of the Federation. approximately 5 trillion naira balances in 2019 audit report unsubstantiated. So that's just 1 year. 5 trillion naira in 1 year unsubstantiated, says AGF office grossly incapacitated. I guess this again re-echoes or reaffirms or re-emphasizes the need to pass the audit bill so that the Office of the Auditor General can be further strengthened to do what it's supposed to do. I've listened to a few people working in that sector, and they say that to a large extent, the Office of the Auditor General is grossly underfunded, understaffed, and all of that. That then begs the question if indeed we are doing what we need to do to fight corruption indeed. Maybe even prevent corruption, because some say it's cheaper to prevent it than it is to fight it. And right under that picture of former President Ibrahim Babangida and a number of people with him, there are some governors actually celebrating with him at 80. 5 killed in Fresh Plateau attack. Lalong meets Irigwe Fulani leaders. That story is on page 5 of the paper this morning, and so many other stories that will catch your interest. Why CBN blocked accounts of Rise Vest Technologies, 5 others. The details you'll find on the inside pages this morning. The Daily Independent is next, and this is what you have on the front page of the Daily Independent newspaper this morning. Expect benefits of Petroleum Industry Act from 2023. That's according to FIRS. That sounds cheering. All the details you'll find on the front page continues on the inside page. It says it targets 10.104 trillion naira revenue in 2022. Wow, that'll be good. I mean, that should help us to stop borrowing and do the needful without needing to borrow. Says Twitter, Facebook coming into tax nets. All of that you'll find on the inside pages of the paper. And right under the picture you see there, uncertainty, underinvestment in oil industry gone. That's ascribed to the President, Buhari. Orders OK Steering Committee on Petroleum Industry Act says host communities will get real lasting benefits. One would probably even guess that a lot of the reason the President is interested in getting this done would be because of his experience working PAF and a number of other aspects, even as Petroleum Minister at some point under a military government. And right above the nameplate, 4.973 trillion naira missing from Federation account. This is quite apt. That's according to Auditor General. 5 trillion naira approximately missing from Federation accounts. Wow. Find the details. How did that go? Find it on the inside pages. FEC OK's 658 million naira for deployment of dogs to Lagos, Abuja Port Harcourt. Oh wow. Approves 21.1 billion naira for aviation, education, others. 658 million naira for dogs. That's quite a budget. Find the details on the inside pages this morning. And right up on the sidebar, you have court rejects AGF DSS plea to dismiss Sunday Igboho's suit. Says restraining order still subsists. We're working to regulate social media, ascribed to Minister Osinbajo. Harps on need for innovation action in vaccine manufacturing, and that's an ongoing conversation. And so many other issues around that one. Take a look at the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning, and this is what you have. 20 years on, telcos attain 297 million phone lines, fail on financial inclusion and security. All of that you'll find on the front page today of the Guardian newspaper. Security expert blames network operators. We provide network information to security operatives, say telcos. And GSMA sees prospect in telco-led mobile money. Well, all of that you'll find, I guess, on the inside pages. So, financial inclusion, is it supposed to be the assignment of the telcos or some collaboration? Because we remember that there was that tiff, if we can call it that, between the banks and the telcos a little while ago. But all of that you'll find on the inside pages. PIA implementation begins next year. Buhari tasks steering committee on 12-month deadline, says Nigeria lost $50 billion worth of investment in 10 years. PGF says act is APC's commitment to economic restructuring. All of that you'll find on the inside pages of the Guardian newspaper. And pick up the Vanguard newspaper today, and it's also about PIA. Silver under fire over 3% equity. Buhari begs. Well, that story is on page 5 of the paper today. It says Nigeria lost 50 billion naira in 10 years, and on. So many other riders along that same line. And under the picture you see there of the president, the vice president, and the members of the National Assembly, the leadership of the National Assembly, 2019 audit report reveals unsubstantiated balances of 4.973 trillion naira, AGF tells National Assembly. Well, squarely there, I guess that's a job for the committees, the respective committees in the National Assembly to do the needful. That's what you have on the front page of the paper this morning. And Mr. and Mrs., you may want to take a look at it for yourself. The back page has sports. AFCON 2021 Eagles can top Group D, says Raw. And so many other issues around that one. The Nigerian Tribune has this one. Nigeria lost 50 billion naira investments in 10 years to petroleum industry stagnation. That's according to the president, named Silva, head of PIA Implementation Committee. It's a win-win for Niger Delta, APC governors say. And all of that you'll find packed on pages 4 and 6 this morning. That picture is of angry youths protesting the death of a 14-year-old boy who was allegedly killed by Amotekun Corps in Ibadan, Oyo State on Wednesday, that's yesterday. The details of the story you'll find on the inside pages this morning. Protests in Ibadan over killing of 15-year-old apprentice. He was killed by Amotekun, residents allege. No, we did not. Amotekun replies. The story is on page 24. Beg your pardon, page 28 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. AGF asks court to dismiss Igboho's suit. The story is on page 8. And a number of other stories you'll find quite interesting. 1,000 policemen deployed in Warri ahead Olu's coronation. So many others. Those using children to beg for alms risk 10 years imprisonment in Lagos. About time, you say? The story is on page 28 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Well, that's the papers today. We're back to take on the issues for the day. Do stay with us. Right now, about the strike of the members of the National Association of Resident Doctors, and the conversation doesn't seem to be abating as yet. As you can see here from the Minister of Health, we're having long conversations, and it would seem like, well, it's the long conversations, unproductive long conversations, so to speak, that brought us here in the first place. And I'm just wondering, Malpai, good morning. I'm just wondering, I mean, what kind of conversations we should be expecting, or how should this even taper on? Well, you're not in the health sector, you're in the communication business, but I'm just wondering, maybe is it a failure of communication, or I don't even know how to put it.
I sincerely wish that I could help with answers on that particular one. We have stayed on this doctor strike issue for a while now. We've even done a position on it. Very rarely do we give positions on issues, but as a station, as a company, as journalists, we have given a position on this particular matter, asking that sincerity comes to play here. That we should prioritize the lives of our citizens. Just going through some posts on social media this morning, and somebody just sadly reported that somebody died in her house. and this is as a result of the strike in doctors, or the strike of doctors, because they took the patients to the hospital and there was nobody on call to attend to the patient. Don't forget that after NARD went on strike, there was also a strike by the consultants. Now, we do not know how far that one went. Perhaps there was some resolution to their own clamor. We didn't get an update on that, maybe because we didn't follow up, or maybe there was a follow-up, I just didn't follow up on that. But I do know that I think as of Monday or so, they did give a 24-hour window for the federal government to take their own issues on board and try to resolve them. How far that conversation went is yet to be seen, or I'm yet to see. Let me be more specific now.
Well, the update on that,
knows, maybe my guest here.
Well, just before that, no, the update really is that the members of MDCAN didn't embark on that strike because I think along the line there was some kind of conversation with government, and it was resolved that, you know what, maybe we should, hold on for a while. There is some ongoing conversation with MDCAN, between MDCAN and government on that one, so perhaps that's why they are holding fire for now, so to speak. But how come we can't persuade the younger doctors? I guess that's where the conversation would begin, Malcolm.
Well, I don't think the younger doctors are so young, but hey, what do I know? Let me speak with those who should know. My guest here, Dr. Mohammed Askira, is the former president of the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much. Welcome our viewers. Thank you, Mope.
I wanted to just ask you, when the association, NARD, is referred to as young doctors, do you guys feel young, or do you think that that's also affecting the manner in which the association is treated?
By and large, saying they are young doctors is not out of place, because they occupy it's a hierarchy. Okay. The medical profession and practice goes in a hierarchy where you have houseman who has just finished medical school and the house officer who is always the first on call, that first comes in contact with the patient. Then you have the registrar, then you have the senior registrar, then you have the consultant special grade 2 and consultant special grade 1. Therefore, the resident doctors actually are the ones that are within this cadre, the lower cadre. So calling them young by virtue of the professional experience is so much in place, but does not mean that they are actually a group of very young people. No, they are actually a group of younger people in the profession, in their professional calling, in their various specialties. They are specializing, and they are the ones that will become consultants after fulfilling all the criteria for the specialization. So I don't think there's anything wrong in calling someone young in the profession, because most of them actually they have been within their specialty for a couple of years, because we have the older ones who are the consultants and the senior consultants.
Well, I'm sure that that's one of the reasons why I don't know, I was asking that question because I figured whether it had sometimes any influence in terms of how government at all levels, because it's not only at the federal level that we have seen the NARD go on strike. We've seen them go on strike also at the state level sometimes, and it would seem that if you were to take an aggregate of all the doctor strike action perhaps that we've seen in the last 5 years, I think that of the NARD has been that which has been most pronounced in terms of the number of times that they have gone on strike. Do you think that their being young in the profession accounts for that?
No. Actually, the major reason for the resident doctors going on strike actually is multifactorial. However, the resident doctors actually make up the bulk of the medical manpower, because majority of the medical doctors are within that group, within that range of below the rank of the consultants. We have, if you compare the ratio, the number of consultants and resident doctors, you'll find that the resident doctors in court, the younger doctors comprises the large number of the medical workforce. And this large number of medical workforce, you know, as you grow older in the profession, so many things come into play. But the problem we have is that whenever you hear strike, most often than not, is when the government part most often fails to do what is needful. I think there is a particular mentality in the system, based on my interaction with many people in position of authority in government, do not have a clear idea of how the health system works. They do not even understand how the hospitals are run. And this creates a lot of issues because they think that the hospitals can be run like any administrative institution, any parastatals. But the way the hospitals are run and the way the medical practice is being, the practice of medicine is something that needs a health administrator or a professional that really understands the working to run it. For instance now, I'll give you an example. Someone will now just wake up and say, the resident doctors are students in training. They are just like any other students. But that is not it. Actually, they are undergoing training. But at the same time, the training is well interwoven and intercalated with in-depth research and service delivery. Because the hierarchy of medical practice is in such a way that checks and balances are placed so that the patient that comes, the ailment that the patient comes with, nothing is left out. So he will see at different levels of care, different level of expertise within the practice. The younger one will see him first and immediately will now evaluate and still re-evaluate with immediate senior colleague, then another senior colleague, then the consultant will come in, then the senior consultant grade 2 will come in, then the specialist grade 1 will come in. This is the way the medical care is given to the patient. For each patient has to go through this hierarchy. And the reason for going through this hierarchy is that, you know, we are not voodoos. We are not doing jazz. We are applying science and in-depth knowledge so that you are dealing with life here. And in dealing with life, you want to make sure that, you know, you subject it to appropriate scientific medical scrutiny so that you come to the appropriate diagnosis and you institute the appropriate care. And through this process, because they work as a unit, this hierarchy works as a unit. Through this process, the younger ones will now learn from the input of the senior colleagues. And the senior colleagues have now given a chance for the younger one also to exhibit what they have learned. And the patient is at large receiving the best of care with the best of safety. This is how the practice is. So outside there, I came to realize when I interface with some people in government, some administrators that are maybe dealing with the budget, dealing with recruitment, I came to realize that they hardly understand the intricacies. And this is one of the reasons why we have a lot of bottlenecks. So they think they recruit into the hospital just the way they recruit people into other sector of the economy. For instance now, I can be a CMD with a hospital and I have a unit of anesthesiologists taking care of an ICU. I have a houseman there, I have a registrar, senior registrar, and a consultant manning the ICU. And because of the issue of brain drain now, people are going out of the country for so many reasons. And doctors especially and other healthcare workers are going out in their droves. And because of the obnoxious climate created by this, our system, many people are leaving. So the patriotic ones that are left behind to serve the people, the patriotic one, I mean it, the patriotic one, they are
you suggesting that those who are leaving are unpatriotic?
No, they are leaving because they got to leave. But the ones, the ones that decided to stay are more patriotic.
Okay.
It takes a lot of patriotism to stay within the system when you have an option of going to a better climate, where you can practice in a better climate. You can go to UK, US, Canada, and even Saudi Arabia has a better climate than our system here. So what actually happens is that you will experience that at a point, a consultant special will leave this country to Saudi Arabia, or a senior registrar or a registrar will leave because he got to leave. The emolument, the conditions of service are not good. So what happens is that I came to understand that the head of service office, the budget office, the Federal Character Commission had put in place bureaucracy for recruitment and replacement into the system. So the hospital is now left without an anesthesiologist. Or in a day you'll see the whole team will leave to Canada. Today there is an advert that next week Saudi Arabia Ministry of Health is coming to conduct interview to take Nigerian doctors away. So in a day you will see the whole team that is manning the ICU will be leaving for Saudi Arabia. What will the CMD do at that point? The CMD will have to now start applying for waiver to employ. Applying, after even getting the waiver at a point, he has to apply for revalidation of that waiver. So it will take him a cycle of between 8 to 16 months to get these waivers, going through this bureaucracy. So these things make them at times to even employ. After employing, it will take a long time before they were enrolled into IPPIS, before they will start getting salaries, sometimes 3, 4, 5 months. So the doctors that are working with them, that are serving, that have agreed to even take the employment rather than going to Saudi Arabia, they come in to fill in these spaces. At a time, they will not be paid salaries for months. And this will now serve as a reason for agitation. And the agitation, the senior colleagues generally, in a family, you will find that the older parents will provide the wisdom, but the agitation is coming from the combatants, just like the military. The generals will give the direction sometimes, and the combatants will be on the field to do the real action. So you always often than not see the resident doctors making the agitation, because definitely younger person has a shorter fuse, and they are just raising a family. They may not have had enough savings looking at our economy, and you are subjecting them to a calamitous economic situation by not giving them salaries or by cutting their salaries arbitrarily. Sometimes it happens. So these are the reasons why you find the younger ones in the forefront of the agitation. It's not that because they are young. Most often, the reason for the strike comes as a result of unfortunate policies of government.
Well, you spoke of older colleagues. Let's quickly go to Lagos and take this to an older colleague who should be in our Lagos studio. Over now to you, Ayo.
Thank you, Mark. Well, the older colleague has been listening intently, and that person is Dr. Francis Duile, who is former national president, Nigerian Medical Association, and he joins us right here, as well as Dr. Akim Akinwale, who is associate professor, Department of Employment Relations and Human Resource Management, University of Lagos. He joins us virtually. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of our conversation this morning. Well, let me begin with you, Dr. Fadile. It will seem like there is a lot more to the issues in the health sector that meets the eye, going by what we have heard from Dr. Askira in our conversation so far. You've been NMA president. do you think the authorities are aware of such complexities, both of infrastructure, of men, and of resources, and yet here we are?
Well, thank you very much. I think it's important for us to know that many of those people at that high level may not be aware of the complexity. But I think I will not agree that it is totally strange to all of them, because the health minister, the Minister of State for Health, they are medical doctors. The CMDs are medical doctors. Even the Minister of Labor and Employment is also a medical doctor. So I think we have a fair number of people who are at that level that should understand. However, I think the government, by its mode of action, is slow to get things done. And when we are talking about health, it goes beyond following the bureaucracy. Dr. Askera painted a scenario where anesthesiologists in a particular institution, if they leave the employment, if we have to wait for another 3 to 6 months before we can get them back, certainly a lot of people will die, because that facility or that opportunity will not be available in those hospitals. And I must tell you, whereas you see average of 10 patients a day, and you need, for example, 20 or let's say 10 doctors in a team to be able to service those patients from time to time. By the time 5 of them leaves, don't forget we do call to cover 24 hours. By the time 5 of them leaves and you don't have replacement, what that means is that the other 5 must cover for the entire duty post. I can tell you there are some periods in which we have consultants having to stay practically all through the weekends, operating, taking care of patients, and they do not have any time to rest. Sometimes, some of them, we have to ask patients to wait for some time, and those patients will not understand what is happening. All they will start crying is that we are here, there are no doctors who are attending to us. So the problem is about proper planning. It's about the premium we put into health. But I want to digress a little bit. Health is not about teaching hospital. Health is not about the tertiary tier of health delivery. We have the primary health care, we have the secondary health care, before we talk about the tertiary health care. And what we have seen consistently in health is that in Nigeria, primary health care is almost gone, totally out of the radar. Because if you look all through the local governments, you barely see 10% of them being viable. What it means is that those who are supposed to be taken care of at that primary health care center will have to move to secondary health care. Secondary health care are being taken by the state government. Most state governments have abandoned the health system. And what did they do? Because the federal government saw the need to take care of the health of its citizens, they instituted federal medical centers in all states. And because they have that, a lot of states have abandoned their secondary health care centers. Many general hospitals are not having proper number of staff, especially in terms of highly skilled staff, doctors, nurses.
And what is the consequence of that? Are those authorities aware of the consequences?
They are. And even where they have employed so few, I can tell you that they are not paying them even their normal salary up to the 11 months, 12 months, 5 months, or so, whatever it is.
It then raises,
So,
raises a question in my mind. My apologies. Let me ask Dr. Akinwale. It then raises a question on my mind, Dr. Akinwale, about what they call dignity of labor. Do you even see that from all the two medical doctors who we have listened to have spoken about? Do you see a dignity of labor being respected by the authorities?
Thank you very much. Well, the answer is very clear, and the answer is no, because the current situation is a battle for safety and a battle for survival. Safety of the medical profession and survival of medical health practitioners. In this case, resident doctors. So, and also on the side of the government and other agents of state system, you can see loopholes in planning and implementation, because the medical residency training is protected by legislation. So that means the resident doctors have expectations as established by the Residency Training Act of 2018. And so the agent of state system in the Ministry of Health and in other parts of the state system are not implementing to the letter the provision of that regulation, which is part of the reasons for the current battle for safety of the profession and battle for survival of medical practitioners. So I think that's the way I would respond to your question.
There is such a thing. We'll come to more details about that one, especially as it concerns what you call safety and survival. I'll probably have to ask the other doctors that one. But in terms of taking care of staff, there is such a body in the Federal Civil Service as Servicom. Servicom is supposed to be, a kind of feedback mechanism, so to speak, to ensure that the wheel of bureaucracy moves smoothly and as fast as it can. And then there is also supposed to be some kind of collaboration between ministries, departments, and agencies across platforms to ensure that that wheel continues to move as it ought to. For instance, there is the National Commission for Salaries, there is the Ministry of Finance, there is the Office of the Accountant General, and of course there is the Ministry of Health, which are supposed to ensure that the doctors, the medical practitioners, the healthcare givers get their dues as they give their dues. In your opinion, do you think that wheel is moving the way it ought to move, or it's broken down?
Also, the answer is no. So all stakeholders are supposed to work in synergy to ensure that the workforce in all the ministries are well taken care of. So, but you have a situation in which the officials in a particular ministry do not properly communicate their practices or actions or decisions with stakeholders in other ministry. And in that way, they leave room for crisis. When you look at what triggered this current strike, the non-payment of allowances and salaries is not new. It has been there. And these doctors have been coping with expectations that these allowances would be paid. But you will realize that there was information that a memo came from the meeting held by commissioners for health in various states, and a memo was raised through the office of the chief of staff. So The doctors were not carried along in that meeting, and possibly other stakeholders were not involved in that meeting. And this raised a lot of agitation, a lot of worries, which was part of the reasons for the current disputes, which is unexpected anyway, which is unnecessary anyway. So stakeholders in different ministries need to work together to create a synergy in managing effectively the workforce in different ministry. In this case, Ministry of Health.
That, especially since we have a former president of the NMA here, perhaps there's been ways that that's been handled before now. But we'll take that on when we return from this break. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Dr. Francis Duile, as well as Dr. Akim Akinwale, are still here with us in Lagos. Well, Dr. Duile, one wonders, what do you think is missing right now? From all that you heard Dr. Akinwale say, one of the reasons for the breakdown of communication would, breakdown of agreement, so to speak, would be that relevant agencies are not collaborating well enough. Is it for you a challenge of collaboration between the relevant stakeholders, the Wages Commission, the Finance Ministry, Accountant General's Office, and as well as the Ministry of Health, or it's a lack of will or unwillingness?
Well, I think it goes beyond that. I think it's more of an insincerity on the part of government. Let me state one fact. The resident doctors today are not asking for salary increment. They are not asking for anything new. There is nothing new on the table. What they are asking is something that they have gone on strike for, they have had an agreement on, and after waiting for close to 3 months, despite all the things that they have signed a memorandum of understanding MOU. After that, they have signed a memorandum of action, and they have waited. I heard what the president just stated in the short clip, and I can tell you, if you are now coming back after about 3, 4, 5 months, and you say we want to verify what have you been doing, it shows that it is not even lack of will; it is insincerity on the part of government. And I think it is important for us to hold the government responsible for what is happening. If the government decides today that they want to clear all the backlog, that they want to right all the ways, or to follow the agreement they have, if you are given 2 weeks, and you have had a whole 3 months, and you have not done anything, how am I going to be sure that you actually mean what you are saying? So I think it is more of insincerity. They say that some people are on give me's. They want them to go to IPPIS. If IPPIS is supposed to be an improvement on a salary structure, should workers who had delivered their professional duties diligently be denied for 3, 4, 5 months? I, as a civil servant, I can tell you I cannot live 3 months legitimately without having a salary. It's really, really difficult for them. So I think the sincerity or the will should come from the government, and we don't need to talk so much about this.
But you know that the government has already taken their NARD to courts, to the industrial court, and already willing to initiate the no work, no pay rule.
Well, I've had this no work, no pay rule. When I was a resident, I can tell you up to today, I have a salary of job that I did, and I wasn't paid. It was because of shortfall. That is around 2005. We didn't get that money up to today. They are also talking about 2014, 2015, 2016 shortfall. They have not been paid. If you see, when you come to equity, you must come with clean hands. If you have not paid for work done, what right have you to say that you want to bring it up, no work, no pay? I find it very interesting. If, for example, you have not paid me for 3 months, how do you expect me to come to the hospital, to come to work? Do you expect me to start trekking for 10 kilometers? How do you expect me to take care of my children? You see, we have to show that we are humane, and we must show interest in others. The doctors, if they are not asking for anything new. They are not asking for salary increment. They are asking for pay us what is in the Medical Residency Act. Pay us our normal salary. And I don't think, sincerely, no work, no pay, coming at this time, it is of ill effect.
Okay. Well, I guess Mokwe has some questions for you, or taking it back there. Mokwe.
Well, thank you, Ayo. Let me quickly bring this to our guest here. I think it's without saying that you'll certainly be in support of what Dr. Faduyile has said. Let me ask you, whether or not you have also reviewed, because yes, indeed, people have talked about how government indeed should, visit this matter with sincerity. But as a doctor, do you continue to worry about the instrument with which doctors press home their demands? Do you think that there is another way around it, considering the number of lives that could be lost as a result of this strike action?
Thank you very much. I think over time, we have come to realize that the truth is many people in position of authority in government, they do not appreciate, they do not understand what is called constructive engagement. They do not appreciate what is called dialogue. They do not understand what is called peaceful engagement to understand our plight. Let me be frank with you. Just like Chief Faduyile said, a memorandum of action was, because of these issues in the impasse with NARD, a memorandum of action was signed at the instance of the Labour Minister, where all stakeholders were brought in and NARD suspended their strike based on the fact that action will come from both sides. NARD will suspend the strike action, while the government functionaries will now pay the backlog of these salaries, enroll those resident doctors that have been working for months without, being enrollment into IPPIS platform, and also pay the medical residency training fund, which was already captured in the budget. We are not even talking about state governments where doctors and other health workers work for 19 months in some states without salaries. We are talking about federal government today because they told us that it is not, the state's issues are not within their purview. Now let's talk about what is within the purview of the federal government. As the chief conciliator of the federal government, the Minister of Labor convoked the conciliation. A memorandum of action was signed in April that, okay, resident doctors, go and suspend your strike. Government timeline, actionable time plan. Go and do this and that. Within 2, 3, 4 weeks, everything will be done. Let me tell you one scary fact that was discovered by resident doctors, that the medical residency training fund that is supposed to be in the 2021 budget, after that conciliation, it was discovered that it was not even captured in 2021 budget. It has to now be taken into the currently signed supplementary budget. If they had not agitated, it will go unnoticed because somebody refused or willingly did not do his job after a memorandum of action. The resident doctors that were captured on the Give Me platform, those that had backlog of months of salaries, because the Give Me platform, the non-regular so-called, it was with the CMDs, but the government centralized it. After centralizing it, took 5, 7 months in some hospital, 4 months in other hospital, without the government paying the doctors while they do the work, saying that they were trying to verify the workforce in the platform. So after the memorandum of action, we agreed, verified. They verified and paid the backlog. And to enroll them, then a circular came from the head of service that they should stop the process of the memorandum of action. And that was what stalled the memorandum, that a bureaucratic process has not been followed, according to the head of service. So in the process of following the bureaucratic process, the resident doctors were patient, still waiting for it, 2, 3, 4 months again. Salary is not paid for these people. And they've been engaging. The president of resident doctors have been in Abuja, moving from one office to another. I did that when I was the president of NARD in 2015, 2016. You'll be going from one office to another. The bureaucratic bottlenecks are there in every office, preventing the flow. So the resident doctors gave a warning a month before today. They now sent a warning that they are given 1 month to government to sort out all these things contained in the memorandum of action. Otherwise, they will resume their strike. After 1 month, nothing was done. The Minister of Labor now invited them just a few weeks to the expiration of the 1 month, just a few days. They came, they said, fine, within those days, if things were done, fine. But after a week, nothing was done. And they had their general meeting, and they took decision to resume back because they understood that people in government do not understand any language except a language of strike. If you want anything to be done for you as your welfare, as your entitlement, I came to realize that it's only when the resident doctor says strike, then you see people running helter-skelter trying to sort out things. Look at it. When was the last time we had a meeting at the National Assembly concerning the matter? Up till today, many things could not be implemented because many officers have not done their responsibilities since April. And let me tell you, the Office of the Head of Service came to tell us that this is a government of law, everything must follow due process. Do you know what the due process? Let me tell you, there is an instance with a hospital that the hospital realized that they don't have manpower. So they need to employ doctors, nurses, and so on and so forth. They now wrote for a waiver for employment. Since last May, they started the process. As at today, as I'm talking to you, they got the waiver because this strike started. Do you know what happened? An officer, a particular officer, after approval of the waiver revalidation, a particular officer in the office of the head of service sat, a particular director sat on the waiver, that he will not give the waiver until his candidates are captured in the employment of that hospital. How do you expect the CMDs to run a hospital like this? And sometimes they will even come with a replacement that our tough doctors have left the country, or they are resident doctors that are in one stage of the program and they have moved to the next stage. You have to fill in the gap. We have to replace them. They will take it to these government functionaries that are supposed to do the checks and balances. They will tell them, you need 12 to replace 12? No, we'll give you 5. They'll cut and give him 5. How do you expect the hospitals to run like this? So in the process, the whole thing now comes down to the resident doctors. Why? Because if I'm a resident doctor and I have my consultant, one consultant and 5 or 6 of us residents working with him, then 3 residents left this country or left a particular stage of the program to another, and you have not replaced them. Our consultant is there. So ourselves and the consultant will have to take the backlog, the workload of those that have left, because replacement was not done. Somebody somewhere in Abuja is sitting on a waiver that he wants his clan without even, they are not even competent for the work. He wants them to fill in a space. So this, their so-called law and order, this bureaucratic process, it is actually laden with a lot of irregularities and corruption. And it is the reason why...
Dr. Askira, I know the scenario which you paint is, very worrisome indeed. And I think that there has been talk around those who are responsible for, for not living up to government side. There have been calls that those people also be held responsible and held accountable, for the current strike action which doctors have embarked on. But we don't know how far that is going to go. But we're totally out of time, sadly. We have to thank you for coming on the program this morning. I really have more questions to ask you because you didn't quite answer my question as to what should happen with strikes, considering the fact that we are losing lives. But thank you so much for your contribution this morning. Dr. Mohammed Askira is the former president of the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. Let me quickly take this to Lagos now. Ayo.
Thank you very much, Mark. Dr. Fadile, let me ask you, do you see an end in sight to this strike anytime soon? What should we do now if we're going to stop this?
Thank you very much. I think we need to do a round table conference. We need to sit down. The government needs to come clean. And I'm very sure that the resident doctors and the medical professionals have empathy of the people who are willing to come back to work. They are willing to come back to work anytime. And that is why you see at every stage, once they give them some assurances, they do not wait for it to be effected. They go back to work. So I think what the government needs to do is to call, let them discuss. And if we see genuine reason, if we see if there are genuine steps, I believe that a lot of things will happen. The medical consultants too, they have not had their grievances taken care of. But they give another 4 weeks window, which we hope that the government will latch upon and get some respite to the people. I think we need the government, the ministries, to come clean and let us. I can tell you, we have a lot of people dying, even doctors, during this strikes period. So it's not a palatable thing. We really need to sit down together and get things done.
Dr. Akinwale, this is all about men and machines, but speak to the men part. You've talked about the fact that there is a need for collaboration, more collaboration with between the stakeholders, ministries, departments, and agencies. But given the sentiments expressed by Dr. Askira, how do you see government taking on the bureaucratic network, bottleneck in the system to speed things up? Do you think an ad hoc committee needs to be set up?
Well, I think what you are saying is directly in line with what the Minister of Labor and Employment has done. You know, the minister has transferred or reported the matter to the National Industrial Court. And this is quite strange because the resident doctors are supposed to be the ones to take the matter to court because an established agreement has been breached. But this time around, the minister's action should be commended because it appears that the Minister of Labor and Employment is interested in resolving the matter as soon as possible. So the minister has stepped some stages in the established procedure for dispute management. You know, you have the mediation, you have the conciliation, you have the arbitration before the court. But from the initial meetings and discussion that was ongoing, the minister realized that it appears there was a deadlock. And to break that, the minister transferred the dispute to National Industrial Court. And of course, it is expected that I'm also surprised that at the last appearance in court, the officials of the Ministry of Labor and Employment were not found in court. And that's quite strange. And that also raises a question on the commitment of the minister. Because on the one leg, the minister shows commitment in resolving this dispute by taking the matter to National Industrial Court. On another angle, there was a non-appearance when the court hearing was taking place. And for that reason, the court was adjourned till September 15. So, on the part of the Ministry of Labor and Employment, I think more proactive actions, more commitment is required. Then, on the side of the resident doctors, I want to say this, and I know they will not like this. Really, doctors are not supposed to go on strike. It's against the ethic of medical profession. doctors need to show full commitment to Hippocratic oaths because life is sacrosanct. And the current situation is a quagmire, and this is at variance with international labor standard. I know doctors do not like this, but they are aware of the fact that hospital is in the list of essential services. So, by virtue of that, all the workers in the essential services are not supposed to go on strike, because if they go on strike, the life of the people, the well-being of the people will be in danger. So, for that reason, really, the strike should be considered, and the court's judgment should resolve the matter. Because once there is what is called the dispute of rights, if there's an established agreement or established memorandum of understanding or action, that forms a basis upon which legal action can be taken against a party who is taking an
Dr. Akinwale, my sincere apologies. We seem to have run out of time, but you know, that part where you talk about essential services and all, I'm wondering what the law says about the authorities ensuring that essential services do not get to the point where they have to go on strike. If the system says they shouldn't go on strike, then the system should also ensure that you have no reason to. That's, I mean, should be a given. But then for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Dr. Akim Akinwale is Associate Professor, Department of Employment Relations and Human Resource Management, University of Lagos. He joined us along with Dr. Francis Fadele, who is a former National President of the Nigerian Medical Association. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Well, Sunrise Daily continues after now with something equally interesting. Stay with us.
Well, moving on to the economy now. This one affects you and I. Yes, of course, health matters affect you and I. But some would say some perhaps more than others. But looking at Nigeria's economy now, we understand that the consumer index and inflation report for July 2021 has gone down somewhat by 0.37% to 17.38% against June 17.75%. Food index, which has been really high, also dropped by marginal 0.8% to 21.03% in July against June's 21.83%. Now we're looking at the meaning of this figure. So it could be possible that, I don't know whether you've seen it in the markets, because what we're talking about here, this percentages should actually reflect in terms of what you are able to buy in the market. Is your Naira able to buy more goods in the market? Is that what it should mean? Well, we have the experts here. Professor Ken Ife is a macroeconomic policy analyst. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
And we also have with us Mr. Monday Michaels Ashibogu, who is the National Publicity Secretary of NASME, that's National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you.
Well, we'll be looking at this marginal decline in inflation in general. I guess the good one is food inflation, because before now people have been reporting rather high prices of food stuff, especially in the markets. But this is what we're seeing now. I don't know whether you can confirm that from, I don't know if you ever go to the market, if you have that chance to, that indeed food prices or anything that you're able to buy has been on a decline. But what do you think will be responsible for this?
Well, first of all, let's clear what we mean by a lowering figure, because I go to market almost every day.
You do?
Of course I do. Now, what it says is that the rate of increase has dropped. Not that it's not increasing. It's still all indices are increasing. So what I bought 2 months ago for 100 naira, this last month, the price would have increased to 100 it would have increased by 117, but no longer 179. So it's still increasing, but not as much as it increased the month before. So I wasn't going to go to the market expecting that the garden egg I bought for 10 naira will now be 9 naira. No, it will still increase.
It just means that...
But it's just that the rate of increase is not as high as it increased the month before.
Wow.
So that is, and it's not one item, across all items. There is increase across all items. And there's a lot more to this when we begin to unpack it, because there are regional, seasonal variation, there are regional state variations, and there are so many other indices at play, 5 of them. Headline, which is CPI, core inflation, the food basket sub-index, rural and urban inflation. They're all playing different games. We'll unpack them.
Okay, but what effect will this, I mean, what immediate impact does this mean for medium and small enterprises, for you at NASME?
Well, it's not far-fetched from what the professor has said. The prices haven't changed, and for those who are into production, it also impacts more on their production capacity. And if you recollect that also, insecurity has also contributed significantly to those who are into agro-processing. So the figures haven't changed in terms of purchase, but also in terms of production, it's been significantly high.
I think what has, worried a number of people, because if you look at the basket in general, the general headline is 17.75, if I'm correct, dropping from 17.93, but food inflation is still quite high, 21.83%. Yeah. Was there ever a point that we were at this level, 21.83?
Well, the thing is, over the last 3 years, the driver has always been security. And security, the highest point of security into this system is food basket sub-index. And this is because we have insecurity issue across the whole 6 geopolitical zones. It's terrorism in the northeast, banditry in the south, in the northwest, then header clashes in the middle belt, and then you have different variants in the south. You have separatism, you have all that. And so you have so many different, and all of them are impacting on food. And if you notice that according to Africa Union, 80% of our basic food are grown by women, 80% of the processing of primary food is done by women, and 80% of marketing of this food in the rural area markets are done by women. And the women are vulnerable because they can no longer go to plant their crops or go and harvest their crops freely as they would. And so that has knock-on effect. But the second thing, of course, is that there is great pressure on our production because we are producing to feed 300 million, not 200 million. We are actually feeding the surrounding Francophone countries. So our food are leaving the frontiers of the north to those. I remember one governor saying that 50 trailers passed through the borders of his heading out to Niger, and that's true. And there's nothing you can do about it because they are all protected by ECOWAS treaty on free movement of goods and services. It's only when you do value addition that you support the jobs in the country. And then if the products are moving out of the border, you can demand tax. And if the producer wants to escape tax, he registered for ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme. And then, and satisfy the rule of origin and all of that before you can get away with the tax. So, but that's not happening right now. And they're not paying for this food with dollar. They are paying settling with our naira. So CBN can't see those dollars if there's none. So then, of course, you have the import challenge that even if we have taken steps to delist 43 items from eligibility for Forex, there's still importation. You haven't banned it. CBN doesn't have the right to ban, but we haven't banned. So people are still going to black market using their money to import simply because the substitution arrangement has not actually confronted the quality threshold of what you are importing. So if you are rich and you can pay for high quality import, you have to do that until we are able to say that in our country we are able to produce products of high quality that can actually substitute effectively for those imports and of course get exported. So it's a very complex story. But the reason why, part of the reason why the food basket sub-index is high is because if you look at the food sub-index as 21 point and the other one, core inflation, at to a 13 point, there's a lag, there's a gap of 7%. And then there's a gap of 3% compared to the composite index. Now, that has always been high. It has always been between 3 and 8%, or off that is the food has always been so much higher than the composite index. But the core should have told us a better story than the composite index. The reason is this. When you look at the food basket sub-index, there are two components of it. There is farm produce and the processed food. Processed food is also part of the core index, because the core index is all inflation parameters minus food sub-basket index. So it is still part of it. And that is why the drop of 0.8% of our in the food sub-basket translated to 0.3837 on the CPI, but then you had an increase rather on the core inflation. The core inflation showed an increase. All other indices went down, but the core inflation showed an increase, which tells you that the difference there is what the contribution of the processed food component of core index. So that processed food component did not drop as much as the food sub-index, because in that processed food, some of them are imported.
So how is that impacting people like you who are in the small and medium businesses? We do know that inflation is a very big worry for the Central Bank of Nigeria. They have been doing, being very aggressive in terms of trying to support small and medium businesses. They have, advised people to buy the naira, buy Nigerian to grow the naira. There have been all manner of campaigns, and in some instances, they do say that there have been some successes. However, when you look at inflation figures, I mean, it's not exactly translating to lower inflation figures, and I'm sure it's a source of big worry to the CBN, especially as we go towards the next election cycle, as we approach 2023, because we know that this inflation figure is only going to get higher. So, but in the meantime, you have already spoken briefly about what this means for you, but can you speak to why it would seem that the interventions of the CBN in your sector is yet to really yield fruit?
Well, in some sectors it is. When you look at the tech sector, it's been quite significant.
Tech?
Yes.
Did you say tech?
Yes, the tech sector.
As technology?
Yes. There are small-scale startups who have benefited significantly from interventions.
Specifically, what sort of tech?
Software. If you look at software applications, if you're looking at software development, if you're looking at fintechs, most of them have been beneficiaries from this intervention. But in area of agro-processing, production, they've been impacted. It's just beyond just intervening and giving funds out. There are other factors that come to play. We've discussed this issue of insecurity in the past, and now it's impacted in production. And then when you look at imports, most SMEs play within the supply chain value system. So you would find them in the processing sector, either as distributors, retailers, or wholesalers. The price for imports, or the cost, has impacted significantly on what they do. So if you look at the food index, like what the professor said, you look at that, the entire gamut of processing continues to go up, because most of them largely depend on the importers who bring in these processed food items. Now, for those who have been engaged in other forms of businesses, you find that the intervention may have played out. We had that with the targeted credit facility. Some persons were beneficiaries, among even our members too, but it's not just enough to put in cash into people's hands. It's also enough to also look at other factors that may impact on their businesses. Policies, multiple taxations, despite the ease of doing business executive order, you still have some states who are yet to comply. I'll give you some instances. There are people who are also involved in agency banking, the mobile money business. They get harassed on daily basis by councils, and the indirect taxes from council officials, from signage officials, from state governments, from the area boys as well, and the let's call them unofficial council, non-state actors. But what is significant is, despite the fact that government makes an attempt in bringing out cash through the central bank, it's just not enough. It's not enough to put cash into people's hands if you cannot guarantee security of what they do. So if you're putting monies into hands of farmers, for example, to process food or to produce, and you cannot guarantee their safety at their workplace, then it becomes a critical factor that will affect food prices. In fact, we're more worried that this year would have been worse off than it is now in terms of availability of foodstuff in the markets. Because given the attendant security challenges for most farmers within the Middle Belt and Northeast, we were scared that by this time, around this time this year, this food supply would have gone down significantly. But so we are a bit optimistic that with a lot of interventions in terms of security, but mind you, it's not just as if the problem is restricted to one part of the country. As you have issues of banditry in some parts of the country, you have insurgents in the other, you have state agitators and self-determination agitators here and there. People are scared to go about their normal businesses. And the most impacted are always small and medium-scale businesses, because these are channels to which the informal sector operates. And largely, women are impacted by this. And the moment where you find women who actually support homes not being able to do that, then you also have another crisis looming. You will be dealing with issues of hunger. You'll be dealing with issues of people moving to the streets with cap in hand, begging. So I think it's very important that we take these things into consideration. But if you look at the figures, yes, it's enough to celebrate that, okay, the prices, the inflation figure fell by some percentage.
Well, there is almost very little to celebrate. When you say that, oh, it's still increasing, it's just that what it's saying is that the rate of increment is now somewhat slower.
No, but I think it's also dangerous to generalize, and that's what has happened from the headlines we got. By the time you look at the entire figures and you look at the consumer purchasing index, you look at the composite food index, you would find that there are more revelations from those figures. Those figures would speak more to the real activities around. You find there that food prices have not gone down. From the report, food prices have not gone down. They continue to increase. But the thing is that the pace at which the increase is, had slowed. So, for example, if you purchased something at 120 naira last month, you may be buying at maybe 125 this month. Doesn't mean that the prices haven't gone up. Maybe perhaps the previous month you may have bought at 100 naira, and then in June you were buying at 120, but in July you bought at 125. That's what the report is trying to say. But it has not in any way excluded the fact or given a wrong direction that the prices of things have gone down.
So not a lot to celebrate. Let me quickly send this to my colleague in Lagos. He has questions for you. Ayo.
Thank you, Mokwe. My question is first to Dr. Michael Ashibagu. Many people would wonder why it would seem like imported goods are cheaper than those made in Nigeria. There's been that talk around that many people would rather buy imported, not because they are better, but because they are cheaper. And this falls to, your sector, National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, who largely produce most of these goods and services. You've mentioned a few likely reasons, but could you please explain why that is the case? I mean, one would imagine, for instance, that imported goods also have their own fair share of challenges. Importers have their own fair share of challenges as well.
Okay, I think that it's also misleading for people to assume that there are there aren't factors that contribute significantly to Nigeria's production system here. We have a high cost of electricity here. You have high cost, different kinds of taxations that come to play. So you find local production very expensive here, given that most MSMEs are not working in clusters, right? So that would have reduced the cost of production. But you have finished goods that are coming from an economic system where practically everything is provided seamlessly, and they have different value-added systems that are given to them. They have tax incentives for export. But in our own case, I'll give an instance. Someone producing in Lagos, particularly in the Ikeja industrial area, you pay as much as 54 naira for electricity per unit. Now, if you pay as much as 54 naira and you have a processing plant, it means you'll be spending close to 9,500 naira in a day to pay on electricity. That's just one part of it. So the cost of electricity is high. The cost of raw materials, acquiring them, you practically running everything. You're running your own generating sets. You're buying diesel at over close to 250 naira. You're spending on other factors which the state ought to provide at a lower cost. So some of these imported products are produced in environments where the costs for these support systems like electricity, processing, taxes and all that are encouraging for small businesses to operate. So in this environment, that's a major challenge. You can reflect on that when you look at even the rice processing. Before now, before the CBN intervened into the rice processing sector, most of them have been producing at a higher cost. And to date, it has not gone down. The price has not gone down. And the whole idea was to stop importation of foreign rice, which we believed was cheaper, and by blocking that, we would have the local producers produce at a lower cost. But today, the story is different. They will tell you the cost of electricity is high.
Is that to assume that, there is no end in sight to that cycle, or that the CBN, for instance, that's initiating these interventions on behalf of, in support of SMEs, hasn't really factored in all these, or you think there is a lot more that should be done that hasn't been factored in?
I think the problem is harmonization of policies. It's just very obvious that we need to harmonize policies. One, you have ease of doing business on one side. You have the electricity companies, the DISCOs, the GENCOs, and the transmission companies on another side, with their regulator on the other side. And they have different policy. They have a different ministry. You have finance running its own Finance Act 2020 on another side. So the thing is, we need to harmonize all policies at national and state levels. So if you have that, you will be speaking, to just one problem. But in this case, where a government is saying, okay, you can incorporate a company for less than 5,000 naira, for example, because of the ease of doing business. But when you want to open an account to the bank charges you as much as 10,000 naira for a search for a company you incorporated with 5,000 naira. That speaks in volumes to the challenge of an MSME. So if you do not harmonize these policies, you don't bring them together to work, in one direction, you will keep having policies coming from different sectors of the economy that are at variance. So it's bound to affect production, it's bound to affect costs for goods and services.
Well, Prof, how do you suggest that we take this on, Professor Ife? I'm just wondering if you agree with some of the things that Dr. Michael Zashibogo has said. How do you see us unbundling, if I can use that, this challenge and helping the production capacity of Nigeria? Otherwise, as you very well have told us a number of times, without producing, we will keep having inflation.
Yeah, one thing I needed to point out is that, there is dumping of substandard goods in the country. Everybody knows that. And even when we closed the borders, it became more obvious. And secondly, there is the anti-competitive behaviors of the countries that are actually exporting their products to Nigeria. And you can't stop them. They will subsidize their products to enter into Nigerian market and decimate the production capacity in the country. They're doing that. Take textile, for example. In China, in Europe, in America, the most of the suits we have only about 10, 12 suits in our cupboard. We don't buy many suits. We don't buy more than 10, 15 shirts. But look at Nigeria. Nigeria is the country that spends money on textile. On Thursday, Friday, Saturday, women will do a shebi for any wedding, for any birthday, everything. Will spend money. And so you think India and China will let you allow your cotton industry to grow the cotton, and allow you to do the joinery and then do the garment? They will finish you. They won't let you. Because billions of dollars have been spent in industrial capacity to produce the textile targeting Nigeria. No other country in the world spends money on textile. Half to a quarter of what Nigeria spends money on. And as you know, is every day. So, you're going to have to take this into account. They will subsidize their products. Government to make sure they push it into the economy and undermine the productive capacity of our MSMEs. End of the story. But then, at the same time, there are other internal forces working against us. If you look at the GDP composition by origin, you see agriculture around 20 to 24. You see industry around 18%. It should actually be double of agriculture. And then you see services about 54, 56. The weakest link in our system is the link between primary agriculture and the production, the processing. That's the weakest link in our economy. And so we have to tackle that link by ensuring that, one, what we are producing is appropriate for the market export that you want it to go via the processing capacity in the middle. So that means that the likes of Anchor Borrowers Program, I've just written a paper to them, the likes of the Anchor Borrowers Program should be looking for prime export anchors who will make sure that the quality all across the chain conform. So when the processors come in and process that food, they will be using like good manufacturing practices and HACCP compliance to make sure that they progress that food to export to meet the quality standard and end foreign exchange.
Prof, just
and
1 second.
Compete with what is being imported.
Just 1 second, Prof. One of the issues that Dr. Michael Ashibogu raised is that of production clusters, and that because SMEs have to produce on their own, literally as we say, become their own local government. They are unable. They have to spend a lot more money in producing as opposed to the products themselves. So the product cost rises highly. And then it doesn't also help, perhaps, from what Dr. Michael Ashibogu has said, that government hasn't really been providing enough of those supports. So with what you are saying now, I would want you to speak to the fact that maybe we need those clusters, maybe we don't. What are those things that have been missing so far?
No,
it's not a problem of policies.
Without a doubt. We need the clusters. In fact, what has happened is that failure of policy is one. We have 34 export-free zones. How many of them are actually operating? We have 23 industrial clusters owned by Smidan. How many of it are actually operating? We have incubation centers in most states. How many of them are operating? So governments are aware that cluster is the way to go.
The question then is
we are now
why?
rationalizing.
Just a second, Prof. Why are those clusters not working? I asked that question against the backdrop of the fact that the African Development Bank is thinking of a special agro-allied processing zone in a number of states in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, 8 to start. And the Vice President has also said that SMEs are going to benefit immensely from that $500 million investment of the African Development Bank in SAPZs. So if the previous zones have not worked, what are the reasons for which they are not working, and how do we make sure that that doesn't happen again?
Let me explain something to you. The African Development Bank, the president of African Development Bank, was a minister of agriculture. And when he was a minister, he was heavily advocating crop processing zones and actually went out to set up some of them. So that story didn't start today. The thing is that there's something about the way Nigeria conducts their business. It's always top-heavy. In other words, what we call top-down. It all has to be initiated by government, and the government does the business the way government does the business. It works. And it should be bottom up. It should actually come to the likes of MSME and tell them, this is what we want to do. Let them drive. It has to be driven from the base. By the time they chop the money that is going to be used to build the center and the other center, they will leave it in a state where even when you bring them in, nothing can happen. But when you begin the planning bottom up, and it is open and is inclusive, and then you've got the people, and you have partnership between government and you build what is going to be sustainable. And then apart from, and also they like to operate in silos. They just go to the manufacturing sector and then work on forgetting that this manufacturing sector has to be fed by primary production of agricultural produce. If you are working from the bottom, all stakeholders that are important will be part of the beginning, the planning at the ab initio in the beginning. So that those who are going to produce the food are part of it, those who are going to process it are part of it, those who are going to export it are telling you what you need to produce and the quality standard that has to be applied in the processing for them to be able to handle this product and not have rejection. You know, it's not rocket science. It's just the way they design how we operate. They operate in silos. Even departments, I'm the chair of the digital economy, bioeconomy, science, technology, and innovation in the National Development Plan. And I had to deal with these asymmetries and what you call these territorial behaviors. You know, they're very, very territorial. They want to see, one department wants to, you know, see the beginning, and because there is a peculiar interest involved, they don't want to work with other departments. They forget that there's no one thing that you can do that doesn't involve many others. It's the design. The design is faulty, it's not inclusive, there's a lot of what do I call it? I don't like to use that word corruption, but the thinking is wrong. The design is not inclusive.
So it's a long road to getting this inflation figures to come down. Is that correct? Let me quickly.
No, I don't think it's wrong. You see, like we said, this is not rocket science. This is something that we can do. It's just we deliberately don't want things to happen. You know, Prof just said this thing, working in silos, you know, everyone wants to be in competition. It's amusing to find government as competitors to itself. It's also amusing to find that you want to be a driver of a process where you have no competence. You know, if something should be private sector driven, you should focus on policy and leave those who are in the process of making money for the system, and you enjoy the benefits of taxes. But when a government decides that it is also a policy driver, it's also going to participate, it's also in competition with another agency in the same system, it will also be in competition with the private sector. What we're asking for is harmony of these policies. We have very laudable policies around this place. Like now, we're talking about this money that is going to come. It's to be an enabler for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. But the question now is, by the time you finish building these clusters, they will become as moribund as the ones we have. Sometimes the locations of some of these centers makes it virtually impossible for businessmen to move their products to those places.
Well,
how do you place an incubation center in the middle of nowhere?
We hope that they will not become moribund. We hope
but that's our hope.
That a lot of the factors which had caused other centers to become moribund in the past will be looked at, and then lessons will be learned from those ones and incorporated here. I don't know, Prof, if you have any last words on this inflation. Are you optimistic that we could actually get this inflation figure down to single digits?
It will be a long time to come, but I don't know. We're in harvest season now.
Yes.
The tempo will continue to slow. You know, we are in harvest season until about October, November, so it will be slowing. But I don't think I will see it slow in this year or next year to single digits. It's quite a way. It's quite a way from now. But it will slow, and then it gets hot again towards December, when people start spending a lot of money for Christmas, and then we are getting to dry season, and then we have planting season, when we have to import a lot of, because we do import beans, cattle, food. We still import from our neighboring countries. And don't forget that one of the drivers, underlying drivers, is the devaluation of the currency. Because 1 naira used to buy 3 francs CFA 6 years ago, but can only buy 1.2 now. That doesn't tell us anything bad about Nigerian economy, but on the money, the foreign currency of the francophone is not really the real value, because they are pegged to euro. and a lot of their forex is being, a lot of their reserves is being burnt to keep that level. So, so there is that pressure. The pressure won't go away because of the differential in the currency and because of their demand. And they also have, they are more landlocked than us. So they do need our food.
A lot of work ahead, certainly not very bright prospects, but certainly not insurmountable. We have to thank both of you for coming on Sunrise Early this morning. Professor Ken Ife is a macroeconomic policy analyst, and also Monday Michaels Ashibogo is the National Publicity Secretary of the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises.
It's the Nigerian Association of Small and Medium Enterprises.
Oh, Nigerian Association. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Early this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's our program this morning. Ayo, do we have mails?
Well, yeah, we have quite a few. Let's see how many of them we can take within the short time we have. Alexander says about the protracted resident doctor strike, politicians and the authorities, you won't be in power forever. So fix our healthcare and other infrastructure so you too can benefit from it later. This strike has made many private hospitals take advantage of Nigerians unduly. My younger sister is a victim of such exploitation by a private teaching hospital in Ikeja, Lagos. I blame this on government for being insensitive to the issue of our public health system. Also, Victor says here, you cannot give your wife 500 naira to prepare a very delicious soup for the family with conditions that the soup must have all the beautiful ingredients while you go to the finest restaurants that serve a plate of food for 5,000 naira. Unfortunately, this is what we are seeing in this standoff between the government and the resident doctors. You can't force a man to work when the conditions are not right. If they have places in the world where conditions of service are good, they will move. If the government faces our health sector squarely, we will be in a better place. Like those days in the university, we see stickers on our lecturers' doors that say, my take-home pay cannot take me home. FG, please make the conditions better for our health sector for the sake of the masses. And also this one by Festus Akimboyewa says, while not paying doctors well and regularly is tremendously damaging the morale of our junior doctors and medical students and appears to have resulted in a total breakdown of trust between doctors and government, our striking doctors must know that their protracted strike is putting patients in great danger regardless of how they want to spin it. Doctors and health workers should not turn to militant groups. And so many of them that we have here, Isioma, Chibolu, Henry Onwonono, Timia Folabi, Paul Gospar, Biyama Kama, and so many others that we haven't taken this morning. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That's the show this morning. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Thank you so much. I'm Maokbe Ogun Yusuf. Have a lovely day.